I understand that the podcast, we understand that the podcast is what it is because of the guests that we have. And yes, we've been blessed to have those connections and be able to get there. And that was one of the things I forgot to mention at the start when we were talking about why I wanted to do this. One of the reasons was I've been privileged to have conversations with amazing people through my role at the Pentecostals of Sydney and through my relationship with our mother-in-law and my pastor. And I wanted other people to be able to hear from these individuals in a casual setting, not just across the pulpit in a more formal setting, but casually hear about their life, the challenges that they face, and the way that they've overcome obstacles. And
welcome to the Hacka podcast. Today we have something special planned for the 100th episode. Today we'll be talking to the founder of the Hacka podcast himself, Greg Hackathorn, from his story of moving to Australia to how the Hacka podcast came about. We really hope you enjoy this conversation.
well, it's good to be back on the podcast together again.
Yeah.
A lot shorter of a break this time.
Yeah. A little shorter.
It was only like
different setting as well, as you can
True.
see.
This is like our 35th different setting or something like that.
Yeah.
It's constant. But hopefully, in the next few months, it'll be one of the last times that we're going to have to be recording at a random place. And we'll finally have a spot where we'll be recording together. So had a bit of an update on the house, and looks like we might be getting in April.
That's some good news right there.
I hope so. So that's sort of been my approach with this the entire time. It's like, oh, well, if it happens, it happens. But at the end of the day, I'm not building the house. So
Was it planned for like April of 2021 initially, or is it? Was it
I think we thought July, maybe.
July 2021?
July 2021
Yeah.
would be the move-in date around that time.
Right.
We're thinking like 3 months to get the land through council, and then a 4-month build or 4 to 6 month build. And yeah, so here we are over 2 years later. But hey, it's been good. Like I think we may have talked about it on the podcast before, but one of the huge stretches of the lockdowns happened while we were staying here with my mother-in-law. So it was good that the girls were able to be with her during that time. We could only travel 5 kilometers. And in Australia, we follow the rules.
Yeah, that's so good.
But yeah, if we were living where we were wanting to live, that was like a 45-minute drive. So that would not have happened. Not with my wife.
Yeah.
We can't overstay 5 minutes on parking. No way we're driving 45 minutes when you can only go 5 minutes. She was worried about me running further than 5 kilometers from the house. I'm an American, so I was like, I'm going to break the rules here. I'm going to go 5.1 kilometers away from my house. But no, it's good. And you just, speaking a little bit of COVID, but you just experienced your first national conference, right, since you've been here?
That's right. Yeah, due to COVID, it was I wasn't able to see the last few ones, and so yeah, it was really we drove down to Canberra, saw the beautiful Canberra.
Yeah, the capital of Australia.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Not sure how many Americans know that, but Canberra is the capital of Australia. It's in the Australian Capital Territory. Yeah,
it's in the middle of nowhere, but it's a planned city.
Yes.
It's very dry. It was a good experience. We were able to see our mother-in-law get ordained.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Really awesome.
That was awesome.
So it was a good experience, good family vibes.
Yeah, it was great chatting with people who listen to the podcast. And
yes.
We know a lot of them already, but yeah, it was cool to get their perspective. And we got some suggested guest speakers, so might be adding them to the list, a guest onto the podcast. But yeah, it was good chatting with people, and they were really nice to us and reached out to us about how the podcast has been affecting them. So it's really cool. And here we are celebrating 100 episodes. Just to me, it's wild that we've gotten here.
Right. And maybe next year we'll just have to get a booth.
Yeah, that'd be actually cool. I wanted to this year, but
someone recommended that to me, and I was like, that's actually a good idea.
Maybe next year you can champion that idea because, well, actually, hopefully next year, because this was my first year running the media for the national church, and so I didn't really know what to expect so much as to how busy I would be, and I was very busy, but maybe with a better team next year, a bigger team.
I hope so, because if I'm running the booth, everyone's going to be very disappointed if they don't see Greg. No, I'm just kidding.
No. Anyway, yeah, so 100 episodes.
Yeah.
Let's go. You saying I need to talk about me. I'm not sure who wants to hear this, but yeah, hopefully someone will get something out of this episode.
I think so. I mean, your story is quite unique. You know, you're an American who moved here at 19,
19, yeah.
right? And I guess let's take a step back. How was that actually?
So I came here as a missionary. The UPCI sent me for
Right.
global mission. No.
And then you met someone and you stayed.
Exactly.
Is that how it happened?
I was in the outback and
you got bit by a snake.
oh man, it was funny. Like I think the first year I was here, friends of mine were like trying to explain to their parents why I was living in Australia over in America, and word got around that I was like on AIM or something, and Bishop Downs comes up to me. He's like, "Oh yeah, we were just in the States, and someone came up to me and said that we had an American here on AIM," and I'm like, "I didn't say that." But basically, long story short, is my wife Stephanie. She went to Gateway. It was Gateway Bible College then. She went there to study music, and I was there studying pastoral studies. I was a pastoral studies major, and I remember telling my dad when I went, I'm going to go 4 years. And I always used to make fun of people that went to Bible school, met someone, and then left, or went to Bible school, only went for a year. I was like, if you're going to study about being a pastor, you should probably stay for 4 years. But then met Steph. We were together and for almost a year, maybe nine months or so. And then I had booked a flight here to come during the winter break or during the Christmas break.
Right, which is summer here.
Yeah, we have summer here. And just to spend a couple weeks here, meet her friends and family, the church and all that. And then
Boom, COVID. No.
stayed here for 7 years. I think that's your story. It actually is your story.
That is.
But yeah, so we came here, and before we came, Steph was kind of hinting that she wasn't actually going to come back. She was only going to come for a year because it was a gap year for her, and so she was going to come here and come back to Australia and do a bit of university studies. And so I was thinking, well, am I going to do a long distance relationship for 2.5 years? And I'm not sure if that's going to be feasible.
I don't recommend it.
Yeah,
it's very hard.
Yeah, it is. It is quite hard. And back then, we didn't even. I don't even think we had FaceTime back then.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And back then, we're talking only 14 years ago. But so then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go for a year. So that was the plan. Come from a year, get engaged, meet all of our friends' family, get married, and then move back to America. And a friend of mine was planning to start a church there in the St. Louis, Kansas City area, sorry. And the plan was to go back and help him. When we moved here, just really felt led of the Lord to stay at our Turning Point conference. Brother Gonzalez was preaching, and really felt that the Lord wanted us to stay, and made that decision. And it was a great decision. So that's how I ended up in Australia through Steph, a relationship. Left Bible school after 1.5 years instead of 4 years, but I completed Bible school in Australia at the South Pacific Bible College.
Nice.
Prior to AABC, and so that's how I ended up here in Australia at the age of 19, moving country by myself.
Yeah, we always talk about. I always had questions for you. How was the move? How long did it take you for Australia to be home? Because although you grew up in America,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you grew into adult in Australia.
For sure.
Is that right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I went from high school straight to Gateway.
Right.
I was at Gateway for 1.5 years. And then when I moved to Australia, that's when I started making adult decisions. So, yeah.
Was there a culture shock coming from Kansas City, St.
Yes.
Louis to House City?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like much different to you coming from New York. Like
Right.
I was coming from a pretty homogenous society in Kansas City.
Right.
Or St. Louis as well. I mean, St. Louis is a bit more diverse than Kansas City, but Kansas City is a little diverse, but not really compared to Australia. I remember coming to, this is a bit inside baseball for people who know Sydney, but I went to Parramatta Westfields, which is right near where we lived, and I remember walking through there around Christmas time and just looking around. I'm like, I'm the only white person here. And I guess coming from Kansas City, where it's a very high percentage of Caucasians, it was interesting. But the church, I mentioned it a bit in the episode with Brother Hunley. I was talking about how the church in Sydney is just incredible. I mean, so multicultural, so many different flavors in the music and in the preaching styles and the leadership. Just an amazing church. So there was a little bit of that, but it was a good shock. It was something that, you know, was welcome. I very much welcomed it. And then I was getting married into a Middle Eastern, you know, I guess I can't say Italian because they're Maltese and they'd be offended if I said Italian, but that sort of background, you know, big family means everything.
Absolutely.
and that sort of thing. And whereas it was a little bit different where I come from, but really cool. I love the change. And yeah, there was change, but change that was welcome.
Even just in like your daily life, right? Just driving, right?
Yeah.
I mean, driving in Kansas City versus driving here.
Yeah, driving on the opposite side of the road in constant traffic.
When you first came, a lot of the motorways weren't even like, they were in construction, right?
Yeah. They were still expanding them. So we had a few motorways, but we had most of them. But I think the M7 had just finished.
Yeah.
They were working on expanding the M2, which affected me because I was living up in Castle Hill, so having to get all the way down across the city. You know, the M5 hadn't expanded yet, and of course the Mate wasn't there yet. The M8. So but the biggest difference would be driving on the opposite side of the road, driving on the opposite side of the car, with blinkers and wipers on the opposite side of the wheel. And
we've all been there where we turn on the indicator. And
well, I still do it sometimes. It's terrible. But the traffic, Sydney compared to Kansas City and even St. Louis. St. Louis has some traffic, but nothing like Sydney. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's insane. But no, I always tell you, if I came in the right time, and also I had you to kind of give me the ropes and show me the ropes.
Yeah, a little bit
about everything. So
a little bit. But you came in a very quiet time because it was COVID season. So
and it was very different, right? Because when I came, I still have yet to experience the Sydney summer that everyone keeps talking about.
Mm-hmm. It's hot.
It's pretty much the same, I guess, like New York-ish, or maybe a little hotter than New York, but it's not crazy. Yeah. Everyone keeps telling me, wait till next year. And I'm just like, all right. It's been
climate change, bro. You know, this probably doesn't add a whole lot of value to this episode, but I remember when I first moved to Australia, my father-in-law, he's so nice. He tried to hook me up with a job because I didn't have a job. Yeah. And there was talk about me interning at POS, but that hadn't really panned out quite yet. And so, like, you know, I'm a worker. I was raised to work. And, you know, my dad, like, if I wasn't working, my dad would just destroy me. So I get to Australia and I'm like, okay, well, I got to get a job. And he hooked me up with a concrete company. And I was like a gopher for like just a hand for a concrete company I lasted 1 week. Although maybe it was 2 weeks. Yeah, I think it was 2 weeks. But I remember like maybe my second or third day on the job, it was like 40 degrees and it rained the day before. So if you know Sydney, it's so humid. And we were like, we were doing like a foundation concreting, and they had already dug out. So there was water that had like filled up this hole where they were going to be laying the foundation. And I'm down there pumping water out of this in like 40-degree heat, just drinking as much water as possible and just sweating. And I'm like, why am I here? What am I doing?
And for those in America, 40 degrees is like 104 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, very hot day. And like you're just drinking constantly. And it was in a newly developed area, so there was no trees, nothing. But yeah, that was my 2 weeks of hard yakka. Here in Australia.
And that was like, you're like, oh, I'm going home after this. I'm going back to Kansas City.
I went to Brother Harvey and I was like, hey, do you need an intern?
I'll do anything.
Pay me whatever.
It just has to have AC.
Exactly.
No, absolutely. So then, so that was kind of the first few years of you coming, you getting kind of that transition. Mm-hmm. And then you obviously get married. You stay.
Yep.
You basically do a bunch of missionary work, right? We did some
travel. Trips. Yeah, we did some trips. Yeah.
You always tell me the one in the Philippines, and then just traveling around Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one that kind of speaks out? You know, that you didn't think that you would do?
Oh, all of them. You know, like my first international flight was coming to Australia.
Right.
I'd never gotten a passport before until I moved to Australia. Like, never expected to travel around the world, and And then in this region, a lot of countries are quite close. We don't have to spend a lot of money to travel into really cool parts of the world. So I've been to Philippines, Indonesia a number of times. I mean, I would have never dreamed to go to Indonesia.
Right.
It wasn't even something I considered. Like in Philippines, at least in the States, you would hear stories of missionaries in the Philippines and the revival there. So that was always a dream. You hear Billy Cole's stories, but actually one of the coolest ones was when I traveled with Pastor to Papua New Guinea. So most of the time on these trips, I'm traveling with someone, so I'm helping them, and then they allow me to minister while I'm there. But with the Papua New Guinea one, Pastor was asked to preach the General Conference, and I traveled with him, and I just remember the stories of Brother Cole about the revival in Papua New Guinea and what they saw there, and that to me was amazing. And if you know the history of the work in Papua New Guinea, that was actually started by an Australian missionary from the UPCA, Brother Carver, which is really cool. We have a great history there, and ministering at their General Conference was just unbelievable people, you know, and that was a great experience. But yeah, I've been to Samoa, Fiji, New Zealand. I mean, never expected to go to any of these places.
Yeah.
Timor-Leste, which most people haven't heard of, I've been there as well. And then this year was really cool going up into the Torres Strait to Boigu Island. That was a highlight. So yeah, it's been an amazing life moving to Australia and being part of the work here, the global work of the church. Yeah, it's really cool.
Sort of like you just said yes, and then all these doors just sort of opened, and you've kind of just been so willing, right? And do you feel like a lot of those trips were like there's like a lesson in those trips, or do you feel like you learned anything particular, or is there one thing that you take from and sort of stretching your comfort zone?
There'd be a few. One is always make yourself available. So a lot of those trips I paid for, they weren't paid for me. A few of them were, but for the most part, you know, Stephanie and I would have paid to go on those trips. So because we were financially responsible, we had the ability to pay for the trip and to go when the opportunity arose. I can't believe I went through the whole thing without talking about the Gulf States trip, but yeah, that one was utterly life-changing this year, and I won't go into detail on that, but that was an amazing trip. But make yourself available, and one way to do that is be financially responsible. And then just learning about different cultures, going to different parts of the world, seeing how they worship, how they live, really opens up your mind, opens up your understanding, and makes you more empathetic to people, especially people who move country. You know, I've moved country, but I moved from a Western country to a Western country, so it's a little different. But you know, we've experienced that, you and I, with some of the things that they do in America compared to Australia. But it makes you a lot more empathetic to people. I remember going to Samoa, and it's so humid there, so humid. It would like rain overnight. You'd wake up, it'd be cool. I'd go for my run, and then when I get back from my run, it would rain again, and then it would be so humid in the afternoon or in the morning through to the afternoon. Rain again, and then it would be humid. This is rainy season, obviously, and then it'd be humid in the evening, and then you see why Samoans walk slowly. It's like, but yeah, I mean, I was barely moving when I was there. It's just so humid. But the global church is amazing, and being able to worship with people in their own language in their cities is really cool. But you know, I think when you had Brother Hoffman on the podcast, he mentioned that he's like, you need to go on a trip. You need to go to a different part of the world and experience that. Whether you're from America, Australia, anywhere in the world, it's great to go to another country and experience the church in that setting. Absolutely. It really opens up your eyes. And you've had this similar experiences. Yeah,
I would say less frequent. But yeah, I've seen, I had like one or two experiences like that. And I think now that we're past COVID, I feel like that opportunity can, be there. Right?
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think during COVID we weren't really planning on any trips, right? But yeah, that kind of leads me to where we are right now, right? All these trips, all these experiences, they kind of build character and sort of added to who you are right now and where you are right now. And so, being that we're on this Hacka podcast, right? On this podcast, when did you first have the idea of building such a thing?
So I've talked about it before. I love podcasts.
Yeah.
Have always loved podcasts. Listening to them, I listen to all different types of podcasts. The idea was really birthed a few years ago. I thought about doing it, and then it was just like I had my blog that I do with my brother. We still have it. We rarely post on the blog side of it. We do the podcast more so now, and he comes on every couple months. He's supposed to be monthly, but that doesn't happen.
We'll include the blog in the description below.
Yeah,
for all those readers out there.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody. But so we started off with that, and then I was like, oh, I really do want to do a podcast. And then I remember the barrier of entry was always, I don't have a mic, so I can't do a podcast. And that's not a mic hackathon, but a mic MIC. I didn't have a microphone, and I was like, well, I can't start a podcast because I'd have to convince my wife to spend $100 on a microphone, and I was like, I just can't do that. So
$100 now.
Exactly. Like,
imagine the Hacka podcast would have never came about because you don't want to spend $100.
Exactly. Such a tightwad. Ask go to missions, bro. But I remember Adam Shaw came. First I discovered his podcast, The Restorationist, and I remember listening to his content, and I was like, man, this is really good. And he's apostolic, and what he's talking about is just amazing content, and the perspective that he brought. And I definitely recommend everyone listen to that podcast. He keeps it regularly up every 2 weeks or so. But I remember listening to that and thinking, well, this is possible for an apostolic to do this. And he seemed to have a bit of a following. People were listening to it. So I was like, well, maybe there's a bit of a market out there for people to listen to this. Because I really just thought maybe we're too niche, the market's just too small for apostolics to have a podcast. But I listened to that, and that was really cool. And then he actually came out for Turning Point, and I met him, and just was really inspired, but still didn't act on it. I mean, he came September 2019, and I didn't launch until end of June 2020. Was it 2020?
2021.
Yeah. So it was a long time, actually. But he sort of, like through his podcast, I was like, well, maybe we can do this. But then the real jump start was you brought a mic.
Yeah.
You brought a microphone from New York. You and your friend were starting a podcast. And
at least thought about
it. You thought about it, yeah.
And I jumped the gun, and I was like, I'm spending this $100.
You were committed. And so I had your microphone, and I remember the first episode. It was on Start With Why, and it was like a 20-minute episode. And I bet it took me like 3 hours to record. Constant stops and edits. And that was audio, wasn't even video.
It wasn't even, yeah. I remember our first conversation about it too.
Yeah.
This is the time we were living together.
That's right.
And you're like, there's so many things I just want to do. So many things I just want to start. And one of the things was a podcast. And I remember you were just like, just wanting to be consistent.
Yeah.
And look where it is, look where Hacka Podcast is, it's pretty cool how that starts from just a conversation to action. It's not easy to put yourself out there. No.
And I think that was one of the things is like, do I want to be out there, and do I want to make myself vulnerable, because you are, if you're going to be having a podcast like this, and it's like, would anyone even listen to it? Like, would I listen to it?
Right.
And so yeah, there was just always that that thought in the back of my mind. And then,
do you ever go back and listen to that first episode again, over and over again?
No, not over and over. It's been a while since I've listened to it. Yeah, I remember I told one of my friends about it, and he goes, "Yeah, I was listening to it. This is months later."
Yeah.
He's like, "I was listening to it." He's like, "Man, it's a bit painful getting through it." I was like, "Bro, you're telling me it was hard work to get that out." But I spent a lot of time writing that. That one was really scripted. We talked about a book, which was one of the things I was looking at doing. But that's how it got started, all the way back at episode 1. So if you guys want to put yourself through some pain, if you're just joining us here in the 90s, feel free to go back, listen to 1, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but sticking with that sort of origin story, the name It's pretty catchy. The
Mm.
Hacka podcast. Is there a reason for that? I'm kind of curious.
Okay.
I kind of already know, but
Yeah.
I think everyone else is probably curious. So why?
So everyone gets a nickname in Australia. Your name is not long. If you have a long name, it's shortened. If you have a short name, it's shortened. They give you a nickname. And so the nickname that they'd given me was Hacka. So
Yeah.
instead of calling me Hackathorn, they call me Hacka. I think Jerry Cannon may have been the first one to call me that. But that has been my nickname for years here. And one of the podcasts that I really love, I listen to it pretty much every week, is the Jocko podcast. And that's actually his first name, Jocko Willick. Well, it's actually not his first name. His first name is John, but his nickname is Jocko. And he's been known like that for his whole life. And I like the simplicity of it, the Jocko podcast. And I was like, the Hacka podcast. And that sounds kind of cool. And I sort of wanted to mirror the content a bit off of what he does, because he does interviews. He talks about books, talks about different topics. Like he doesn't pigeonhole himself. The podcast is sort of centered around his personality and what interests him. And that's basically what our podcast has centered around. It's centered around our personalities and what interests us. We talk about what we find interesting. We have conversations with people who we find interesting, whether that leads us to psychology, or that leads us to missions work, or it leads us to athletics, or talking about volunteering. You know, we talk about things that are interesting to us. And so that's kind of how it started. Put the name off the back of that.
So how did the first 3 months go of initially starting the Hacka podcast?
It went okay. I remember when I first announced it, it was really good. Like, everyone was excited for us, and like, you know, it was during COVID, so no one had anything to do. So everyone was on social media all the time. That was at the beginning of our big lockdown.
That's actually a good point. Like, you took advantage of being locked down to work on something as well.
Yeah, I did. And the good thing was audio as well. So I didn't have, the dodgy haircut didn't matter. Recording my pajamas didn't matter. Just wearing a hoodie all the time.
Yeah,
didn't matter. But I had already planned to start. It was actually, it had to be God, right? Like, I don't believe any of this is just through my desire to do something, but I really feel like God is in it and involved in using it. And I had already recorded 2 or 3 episodes before the lockdown, because I remember the first few episodes I recorded at my desk in the church and edited it there. But then when the lockdowns happened, we couldn't go to church. I didn't go to church for months, except for on Sunday. So those were recorded prior. I had like 2 or 3 of them. And then when the big lockdown happened, or when they first announced it wasn't supposed to be big, it was going to be a couple weeks, and then it ended up turning into 4 months. But I'd already had a few banked up, so then that's when I published the first one at the end of June. And but the first 3 months, went pretty good. It was pretty much Australia only, which I'm so grateful for the support of my friends and family here in Australia. Like, there's still, we probably have more listeners in America now, but we have way more reviews in Australia. The support is just amazing. So, hey, Americans, we'd be very happy if you love the podcast. We like the commenting, but leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, because that really does help. It really does help. You see it in the rankings. As soon as you start getting reviews, you climb the rankings. So if you guys want to help the podcast get out to more people, we'd really appreciate that. But that being said, the first 3 months was pretty good, but it was kind of the same. Every episode was roughly the same listeners. It would drop down if it was just me. If it was a conversation, the numbers would go up. And then I remember I had the first big ones that I had, really, as far as numbers go, was Pastor, when I had Pastor on. I think that was like episode 6 or so. I can't really remember exact episode number, maybe 9, but around that time. And then we had our first international guest, which was Loami Diaz. Had him on, I think that was around episode 16. And then the one that was super impactful was Chris Green. Had him around episode 20. And that was an amazing conversation. I still recommend people go back to listen to it, even though we're still honing the craft. Probably not the best questioner at that time, but the content is amazing. And I definitely recommend people to go back and listen to that one. But yeah, the first 3 months was good. But no explosive growth. It wasn't like an overnight success or anything like that. So.
Right. And then Was there any equipment changes that really sparked it? Or no,
So we had your one that I had, and I used that one, and it was good. It was actually better than the one I bought later because I didn't know anything about mics. Still don't know heaps, but the one that you had was a compressor mic, which is way better.
I had no idea, by the way.
Yeah, and then the one I bought, which people had recommended, was the Blue Yeti, which looks cool, and a lot of people have it. But it's really not good for
picks
podcasting.
up everything,
it picks
right?
up everything.
Yeah.
Like the mics we're using right now.
Especially in Australia, like the birds were on the podcast.
Yeah, they're joining. But I spent so much time editing. I had to get another program that I use to edit it to try and get rid of some of the background noise. Like I remember I would record an episode at a church, and we have these big trucks that drive by my window, and you would hear it. I'm just like, come on. But yeah, so we started off with the one you had. I don't even remember the brand, but it was good. And then got the Yeti, the Blue Yeti, and then we were gifted this setup. So we bought the mics, but we were gifted the Rodecaster Pro setup, which is amazing. Someone who supported the podcast, who really enjoyed what we were doing and believed in us, bought that for us. And I would have never convinced my wife. Oh, probably could have, but I wouldn't have even brought it up because it's like a $600-700 thing, and it's really good, and it really changed the quality of the audio that we were producing.
Right. Yeah, it's truly a blessing, right?
It really is, yeah. And in these mics, you bought your mic, I got mine. Yeah. We have another extra one.
Yeah.
We probably do need to get a fourth one, but we'll wait till we're having a lot more in-person conversations.
It's
we'll
just
do that.
Side note, but it's just funny how $100 mic is pretty good, but then $170 mic is way better.
Yeah. Well, the biggest difference is I think your mic and the Blue Yeti, they were both USB mics, which are okay, but the quality is nowhere near as good as these ones. These are proper mics and in a proper setup. So and then we made the leap. We talked about it a little bit in our review. I think end of year review, we talked a little bit about the leap into video. Right. So we did that, and that was a big step of faith and a commitment to a lot of hard work, but it changed the podcast because video content is able to reach a lot more people, especially on social media, than just audio content. Audio content is typically most people will listen to the podcast rather than watch it, but the video content allows us to reach more people, and that's how we've seen the podcast grow.
And it also turned you into a video editor. Right?
Yeah, oh man. Yeah. Well, I did a lot of video editing for the church, because some of the skills that I had, I had that previously, but man, some of the edits, like we were talking about a little bit with setting this up. You never know the mistakes until you make them, and there's been a number of them. I remember a couple episodes we recorded at the wrong setting. So one camera would be on one setting, the other camera would be in the other setting, as far as frames per second. And so then you're trying to match that up later, which is so hard to do.
Lighting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the funny one is Brother Uwade, that episode. Of course, it was another one where I did it without you, without the expert. I recorded the entire.
That, I guess.
The camera that I used for him was one that Jimmy, one of the guys at church, was using on Sunday, and he was recording. I had no idea, but he was recording slow motion for some of our video content at church, and I didn't check the settings. I did an entire hour episode with Brother Uwade recorded in slow motion. So I had to figure out a way to save that, and that took hours of research to figure out how to get that right. But yeah, it's been a big leap, but we're getting a little bit better. I think we're getting better.
And all these mistakes, you're going to run through, situations where you're going to mess up, right? And did you ever feel like you wanted to stop, or maybe you felt burnt out, trying to learn everything and do everything?
There was a couple times that I thought about that. I remember when I started, you think you're going to put it out there and that you're that special person that, you're going to be like Jason and Travis Kelce when they launch their podcast and all of a sudden they're number one. You think you're going to be that special person that everyone's going to listen to straight away. But the reality is you got to work at it. And I think after the first little bit, I had thought about, it's like, why am I spending so much time? I feel like I'm wasting my time, that sort of thing. But I did make that commitment at the very beginning. I may have mentioned it before, but I committed to 20 episodes. So if I was going to do it, I was going to commit to at least 20 episodes. And the reason I thought about that is because I was listening to a podcast and he said, statistics prove that if you record 20 episodes, if you're able to put out 20 episodes, you're in the top 2% of all podcasts in the world, just through attrition, just because you made that decision that you're going to put out 20 episodes. And I thought, well, if I commit to 20, we'll see how we go. And then from there, whatever. I committed to once a week because my favorite podcasts are weekly podcasts. I do listen to ones that aren't weekly, but my favorite ones are definitely weekly, and I look forward to them every week. And so committed to that and committed to at least 20. And then episode 20 was the one with Chris Green, which really was the most successful of the first 20 as far as listeners go and reach. So, not to say that I would have stopped, I probably wouldn't have, but definitely the thought crossed my mind late at night, editing, trying to. I remember when we first started doing video, I wanted to get video and audio out at the same time. So I was staying up till midnight, editing video, trying to get the video done.
And for those who don't know, you wake up really early.
Yes.
You wake up,
Yeah.
so you don't stay up till midnight. That means so much because you wake up early to just go out and run.
Yeah. I'm an early riser. That's a bit of Jocko influence, but yeah, I get up at like 4:30. Typically, most mornings I'm out the door running before 5. And so, staying up till midnight is not something I do.
Right.
And I was staying up multiple weeks in a row. And then I finally made the decision. The video doesn't have to be out at the exact same time. So if it's not out at the same time, that's okay. As long as the audio is out every Tuesday, which is what I plan for in Australia. Australia Tuesday, that tends to be Monday in the States. So.
Right. And then I guess when you first started, did you ever think that you would reach 1,000 followers, much less 22,000 that we have on Instagram right now?
The dream was, definitely wanted to. Always wanted to reach, like, the goal was really 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That, if you're a creator, if you do any sort of video content, that's really, I never expected Instagram to grow the way it has. And a lot of that is off the back of a viral video, which you don't have any control over. You just put content out there, and I'm not putting content out there to go viral. I'm putting content out there because I believe that this 45 seconds, this 60 seconds that's from the guest is a good idea of what the episode is about, but it's also going to minister to people by itself, on its own. So when I'm thinking about content, I'm not thinking about virality. I know some people are like that, and that's fine if that's what they want to do. That's not my purpose. My purpose isn't virality. My purpose is to minister. I want to minister to people through the podcast. And so we just happen to have one of our reels go crazy. It has over 900,000 plays, and it's still growing. And that really is what pushed it. So, I take it for what it's worth. It's people that don't really know the podcast that are following it, and that's a blessing that we're able to impact them through the stuff that we put out. But for me, the cooler thing is the weekly audio downloads and the views on YouTube and the subscribers and that sort of thing, because those are more real. Those are people that are invested in the show and ones that we can impact week to week, we're helping their ministry, we're helping their personal life through the content, through the amazing guests we have on. I understand that the podcast, we understand that the podcast is what it is because of the guests that we have. And yes, we've been blessed to have those connections and be able to get there. And that was one of the things I forgot to mention at the start when we were talking about why I wanted to do this. One of the reasons was I've been privileged to have conversations with amazing people through my role at the Pentecostals of Sydney and through my relationship with our mother-in-law and my pastor. And I wanted other people to be able to hear from these individuals in a casual setting, not just across the pulpit in a more formal setting, but casually hear about their life, the challenges that they face, and the way that they've overcome obstacles and that sort of thing. And that was really one of the things that I wanted to get out of conversations that I have with people. That's why I try to make them more personal. We're not talking about a subject. Sometimes we do. Like if we have them on a second time, we'll talk about a specific topic that they would be an expert on. But for the first time, I want people to get to know that individual, to know their strengths and even some of their weaknesses, their faults, but also their successes, and understand that these are real people that, if you are committed to the Lord and you follow after him, the things that these people do are attainable for everybody if we're willing to stay committed to the call of God that he has on our life. And finishing up this episode, one of the things that I really wanted to talk about when talking about the podcast is stickability. If you're going to start something, remain committed to it. If God's asked you to do something, don't give up at the first sign of struggle, or if there's a challenge, an obstacle to overcome. I mean, Lord knows, the obstacles that we've had to overcome trying to get these out every week, whether it be location, where I'm at, where you're at, where we're recording, what equipment we're using. There is obstacles. There's always a reason to not do something, but there's always a reason to do something. And especially if God has called you to do it, and he has something, and he's going to use it for his glory, then, we need to be the best stewards that we can be of what he's given us, the thing that he has called us to do, maybe the talents that he's given us, if we have any talent, but, the friendships that we have, that sort of thing. Use it all for the glory of God, and don't allow something to stop you, but remain committed, because it's over time, it's over effort, it's over energy that you'll start seeing success. And you may not always see success. There's stories of painters who died poor, and then after that, their paintings were some of the most expensively sold paintings, and they're the most well regarded by experts now. They never experienced that. Same with the struggling poets. There's a lot of poets that are considered the greatest English poets ever, but they never saw that success while they're alive. So you may not see it in this lifetime, but if it's something that God has called you to do, and he's given it to you, then it's our responsibility to be good stewards of it, and to just not quit. Don't give up. If God's called you to start that church, start the church. If God has called you to lead that small group, lead that small group. If God has called you to start a podcast, look into it, start it, ask questions, but remain committed to it. If God has called you, whatever he's called you to do, to serve, do it with all of your might, and don't allow anything to stop you from accomplishing what God wants to do in your life.